Day 3. This session is how to win an editor's heart. I'm Dwayne Clayden. I'm going to be the moderator and hopefully keep things flowing and throw in a comment or two here or there. But the first thing we need to do is introduce the panel. So we'll go on my screen up to the top right, and we'll have Suzy introduce herself first. Just tell us about yourself, what you're writing, and any other background you want to share.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of WWC. So I am Suzy VADORI, for those of you who don't know me, and I am a young adult fantasy author. I write, I've got a trilogy out, the Fountain series, which has the Fountain, the Westwoods, and Wall of Wishes. But in addition to that, I'm also an editor and a book coach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that's like today. I became an editor because people were asking me continuously for my help, and I fell in love with helping because I've been in the industry for about 10 years, and I've learned so much by working with the amazing folks in this industry. And I find it's really hard, especially when you're first starting out, to find out what the expectations are and the secrets. And so I love helping people figure that out with their stories and making them the awesomest that they can possibly be.
Perfect. That sounds great. And we'll go over to Diane.
Hi, I'm Diane TERRANA. I am the executive editor at The Rights Factory, a Toronto literary agency. I teach editing at U of T in the School of Continuing Studies, and I was the co-publisher of an online lit mag. And as well, I am a YA debut author. This is my novel, The World on Either Side.
Excellent. Great. And Jonas?
I'm a thriller author, written almost 40 novels now, and I started editing professionally about 5 years ago. I'm a freelance editor, and I work for a publisher, Vesuvian Media, and I've been doing editing for about 5 years, but writing for over 20.
All right. Thanks, Jonas. And I'm Dwayne Clayden. I was a police officer and a paramedic for over 40 years in Calgary and area. So you write what you know. So I write crime thrillers. They're set in Calgary in the 70s into the 80s and based on a few things that I actually experienced. One of the things I talk about at these conferences is getting police and medical scenes right. So some of the editing that I do revolves around police and medical scenes and helping authors get it realistic. All right. So just checking out my notes here. We're going to get going. So I thought maybe we would just go around the table and just talk about if when you're editing, what are the things that you think are maybe the easy fixes, the things that maybe even the author could take care of before it even gets to you? Because I you know, as a reader, if something doesn't quite look right or read right, we get pulled out of the story. And I would guess it's the same thing for for editors as well, that something kind of jars you. So if you can think of some of those easy things that could be fixed before it even gets to the editor. Maybe Diane, do you want to start?
Sure. So at my agency a few years ago, I was asked to edit a novel, a YA novel, and do a big copy edit and proofread, because the author couldn't use past present tense perfectly. So I refused to do that, thinking that an author should learn how to use the past present tense and other tenses, feeling that that is your craft. And yes, there's a lot more to writing and to telling a story than grammar, but that should be one of the basics that an author dedicates himself or herself to learning.
Okay. That's great. Jonas?
Some of the easy things that I feel an author can, you see, when an author submits a manuscript and they've got a manuscript that needs a lot of work, the price for editing can increase. If you can get some of the easy things done yourself before you submit to an editor, at times you can actually reduce the cost of editing because of the time it'll take to get deep into this manuscript. So I would just sum it up as line edits, things that don't stop an editor and it also depends on the kind of edit. I mean, if you're doing a developmental, we're really not looking at line edits at that time, but really small things like echoes, words that are overused that stand out. These are the kinds of things you'll catch when you're reading your manuscript out loud. Even have a few beta readers will come back with some of these things, and just really small. I mean, I really don't like to focus too much on line edits, but I mean, for the author to focus too much on that. But if they do clean up a few of those things, there's a certain, I wouldn't say rules, but there are certain things like too many exclamation marks, too many semicolons. You can fix a lot of that before it goes to an editor and cause this editor to have less work. And one more quick point is that when I first started getting my books edited over 20 years ago, and I was seeing all the edits that my editor was giving me, I tried to learn from them. So each successive book, I would do less of those mistakes. So I think that's what we're really talking about, is try to learn from what your editor's giving you and apply it to your evolving inner writer. And you will get 5,000 edits in a manuscript down to 2,000, down to 1,500 over time.
Yeah, okay, those are excellent tips. Suzy?
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. And thank you guys for your answers as well. I think Diana's absolutely right. As soon as when you're submitting it to an agency, it should already be very, very polished. When you're submitting it to an editor that works on developmental editing, or even as a book coach, I work with writers right from the very beginning. So I don't always expect it to be perfect. And in fact, that's what sometimes, as Jonas said, an editor can show you. So what I like to say is that you should just take it as far as you can take it by yourself. Do everything that you know how to do. Please run it through spell check, or even a rudimentary something that will tell you if you have too many repeated words. Some of the editing tools out there, so that you can catch some of those things yourself. But I think that when you're working with an editor, especially as an early writer, it's a chance to learn, just like Jonas said. And I will provide, so what I do is I'm a developmental editor, so I look at big picture, we might get into that later, and not the sort of nitpicky line edits. But I generally do a nitpicky line edit for the first 20 or 30 pages, and then provide you with resources. So if dialogue tags is an issue, it's an issue for tons of people. And it was an issue for me when I started. I knew how to do one way correctly, but I didn't realize that you could do lots of ways correctly. And so I like to point that out, and I'll fix it for a few pages, and then I'll be like, hey, I'm going to stop fixing this through your whole manuscript, but here's the tools, here's the rules, go do it. So I think it's an iterative process. When I work with more experienced writers, I expect them to have a lot of that done. And as Jonas said, sometimes that means that the price goes down because I'm just doing a manuscript read and giving them advice versus teaching. But I'm happy to do it either way, because I think you have to learn somewhere. And a lot of these rules that, when we've been entrenched in the publishing industry for a number of years, it's really obvious and it jumps off the page, is really hard for a new writer to learn. There's conflicting advice out there sometimes. And there's lots of nuances to it. It's not like business writing. I was a business executive for 20 years before I became a full-time writer. And editing in business is about commas and periods and capitalizations and references and all those things. There's a lot more to writing a story than just punctuation. And so those nuances are really something that you have to learn from different sources and take all their best advice.
All right, super. Yeah, I think that's all great advice and things that I was thinking of as well. As you mentioned, Suzy, some of the simple things, running it through a spell check and just having the spelling right. And there's simple programs, more complex programs. Although I find sometimes the same program will argue with a word. It'll tell me to change it. I change it, and then it tells me to change it back right away. So you just have to be aware. They're not perfect. By any means. And the other thing Jonas mentioned that I'll just expand on a little bit is online you can search the word crutch words, and it'll bring up a list of words that are overused and that you can think of taking out of your manuscript. And then I add my own words to it. So every time something of mine is edited and somebody points out the crutch words or the words that I use too much, and one of mine is I start sentences with I think, and then I went on and did something. So I think I can delete I think out of all of those sentences. So that's one of my personal ones. So I just add it to the list. So before I submit it to somebody, I've already gone through my crutch words and kind of looked to make sure I'm not using I think, and initially that would come up tens of 50 times in a story, and now I've got it down to maybe it's 8 or 10. So my learning curve isn't quite flat.
If I could add, without belaboring this point, if I could add, one of my crutch word was I overused the word that. In my first, 5 manuscripts, 7 manuscripts, I was overusing the word that all the time. And so now, in every book, I was seeing it being taken out. And I was like, why do I keep doing that? So now it's one of those words that I search for. When I get a manuscript, I do a search for that. And I mark down how many are in the book before I start editing someone's work. And Suzy also had a great point about learning. One of the things that she was saying, something about, if I don't want to misquote you, you do so many
Go
pages
ahead
of
and misquote me.
so many pages of line edits, at which point you stop. You don't want to continue to say correct speech tag and so on. You show them for 30 or 50 pages and then do another form of an editing for the rest of the manuscript so that they can go back and learn from that, and then they can apply it to the rest of the manuscript and any other book they've written. But I think that's brilliant, because that's similar to what I do is I make an edit. And I see, like, let's call, I don't know, throw one out there, split infinitive. And I see they've taken the phrasal verb and they've split it. And so I highlight the whole thing. I make the change. And then I put a big piece on the right side, a note saying, here's what it is. Here's what it means. Here's what you've done. Here's how to fix it going forward. I'm going to keep marking up every time I see a phrasal verb split or an ellipsis is misused and it's bumping up against words or there's things like that. So I will give them the rule and even give the reference to Chicago Manual of Style or what Strunk and White said, and go from there. And I'll do that, say 4 or 5 times, and now we're good. And I'll leave the rest for them, So I like a lot of what everyone's saying, and I also like to do that because it's about editing, but it's also about educating.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just add one more thing there, Dwayne. So that is absolutely, if I could go back in my first book and take out more of that, I would. So it's more important than just, it slows the pace. And when you use, if you're new to writing and you don't know what the list of words is, you can look up filler words. Look up filler words in writing, and you'll find that list and take a search, because it's not uncommon to find maybe 1,500 that in a manuscript. Yeah. And the thing with that is you can't take them all out because it won't make sense. You can't just do a find and replace and take them out. That doesn't work. But if you go through the manuscript and you look at each instance of it, and take out as many as you can, you might be able to get 800 words back of that 1,500. It's word count bloat, right? So if you're trying to make a manuscript stronger, and the other thing is that the reader just skips over those words. So all of that list of filler words, they just skip over it, and it becomes annoying and it slows the pace, right? So that's the reasoning behind it. So as Jonas said, I like to explain not just take out the that's and that's my opinion, but what is the science behind it, and what does it do for your reader experience? And then Dwayne, I'm going to tell you that your I think, those are filter words, right? So do that again, guys. Google filter words in writing. Yeah. So I think if you're in your character's perspective, you don't need to say I think. If it's there, you're thinking it, right? So so there's those little extra phrases that will slow the pacing. And especially, I mean, I edit in lots of genres. I edit in nonfiction, in fantasy, in science fiction, women's fiction, and romance, in addition to YA. But especially in YA, if you got those like extra stuff in there, then it's boring to read, right? So there's a reason behind it. It's not just our opinion. You're gonna put too much extra stuff in your word count, and if you can see there, I told Joe that at some point my camera was gonna fix that orange. I don't know what's going on with it. I'm not orange anymore. But yeah, those filter words actually pull you back from that perspective. Yeah, anyways, I'll be quiet now.
Diane, did you have something you wanted to add in on this one as well?
No, I just agree with everything that's been said.
Perfect. Okay, so if those were kind of the easy, quick fixes that an author can do before they submit chapters or a manuscript to you to be looked at, what would some of the more I don't know if the word is intermediate, but next level up things that you see? Let's say that this is an author who isn't a raw rookie, but is still learning the craft. What other suggestions would you have for them beyond, looking at using Grammarly or something for a spell check and double checking those clutch words? So what would be the next level? Anybody want to jump in?
I'll jump in. One
Sure.
thing, sorry. One thing that I always say to authors I'm working with is that if I give you a list of books that I recommend that you read, it's actually not a recommendation. It's kind of an order. So I'm editing a book that we've signed at the agency, and I will find comparables that I think would help the author write the book better for various reasons, character development or plot development, or the way they're doing dialogue, exposition. And that is something that I can't stress enough. Read books all the time, but particularly please read the books your editor recommends.
Okay. Great one. Yeah. Yeah. Jonas?
Yeah, that's great, Diane. I really have to back that point up. I've got a point of my own to make, but that was actually a suggestion. One of my major editors in New York in 2004 gave me that suggestion. She actually gave me a list of books, and I raced out and read them, and it enriched my life immensely because of that, and I understood her direction and all that. So anyway, great advice. I just wanted to back that up, but also, you know what I would say to this question? As soon as I heard the question, my head went somewhere else, but it may still be in relation to this. Interview your editor. And I'm saying that, look, if you get picked up and you're at a publishing house, they're going to assign an editor. I've got editors at different publishing houses that I've worked with. You know what? Some I like what they do, some I don't like what they do. There's even one I didn't like what they did, and it was really hard because they were doing an edit, a character edit, and they were taking my character to a place I didn't see it. I had my character going in this direction. They wanted her to go in this direction, and we had a bit of a headbutt on that. But I just believe in my story too much sometimes, and so I pushed back a little bit on that. But in the end, they had the IP, the intellectual property, they had the rights. So that's a long story. But if you're doing a freelance, and you're going to hire an editor and you're going to spend money that you are making at your day job, I recommend you interview your editor. And what I mean by interview is get them to do a couple of pages. Get them to do 3 pages or whatever that editor's comfortable with doing. I always do. I'll even do a full chapter to show them what I can do for them. But I recommend that because I get stories all the time. I have a manuscript. Oh, can you read my manuscript? I don't have any time to read anybody's manuscripts. But anyway, I get that all the time. And so I get, can you read my manuscript? And maybe you can give me a blurb, or maybe you can. And you know what? If it's someone I know, or I've done this several times, but I start reading and I'm on chapter 2, say, and I have already seen 25 edits by chapter 2. And I think, oh, have you sent me the wrong copy? And I fire it back to them and say, well, I'd love to read it, but there's a lot of work still here. What's happening? Oh, no, I've paid for editing. I've paid like $1,000. And this guy, he did this and that and the other thing. Well, my goodness, who's your editor? So they didn't. I just think that you need to interview. You need to look at, and then even interview 3 or 4 and see what they're offering, and maybe go from there. And I just really think that you really got to know what you're paying for. And I'm not saying that editors are trying to take your money and run. I'm sure there's editors out there doing that, but I'm sure that this editor who did the job really tried to do a good job. I'm just saying, get someone that fits you, because I actually had an editor out of Australia once in 2011 that I worked with for 2 novels, and I couldn't work with them anymore. They were doing edits that it wouldn't work for me. Without going into that, it would be another 10 minutes. And it was a bad fit. It was a total bad fit. They were getting rid of contractions. There's one big one. Getting rid of contractions in dialogue. And I really believe in contractions in dialogue because people speak. They say, I couldn't believe this. They don't say, I could not believe this all the time. I like contractions. And they were taking them all out. So anyway, it's a long story, but I didn't interview that editor. And I really think that readers really need to know who they're getting involved with, into business with.
Okay, perfect. Suzy.
And I love that, Jonas. I think that you and I probably edit for the same reasons, because again, do I have time to edit? Probably not. But the reason that I do it is exactly what you just talked about. It's that middle of the night or 6 a.m. call from a colleague who got an edit back and it wasn't good enough. And they said, Suze, you have to do this. Like, you have to help. And I've helped. And I've done that to other people too, where I've gotten an edit back and I'm like, oh, I know that there's still problems in this manuscript that I can't see and I need help. And so, yeah, so I just started doing that for people because of my frustration that that not everybody is giving amazing edits. And I've had amazing, amazing editors. My agent is amazing to actually go through and do those helpful comments. And so I've learned from some incredible people, and I really want to pass that on. In terms of Dwayne's question, it's a huge question, Dwayne. What else should they worry about in their manuscript, right? And it really does depend. And I kind of feel like we're doing some kind of course right now where we're being quizzed on all the editing things. But I did actually put together a presentation. So if you guys didn't get a chance to take a look at my presentation on Friday, I'm not sure if it's up on YouTube yet, but it will be this week sometime. I talk about 4 things in that presentation, and they're 4 things that I think that a lot of editors won't work with you on. So just be aware of them. What's the point of your story? So what are you trying to say? And if you don't know that, then your story will ramble. Narrative drive, so making sure that each scene leads to the next scene, that you can link them with causation. So something happens, but something else happens, therefore something else happens. That's good. What's not good is something happens, and then something happens, and then something happens, and then something happens, right? So that's narrative drive. And that's a tricky one. Sometimes you can't see that until your whole manuscript is done, and you kind of got to map out the scenes and then see if they make sense, and you can see what to cut out. Character agency is a big one. So is your character driving their own destination? And show, don't tell. Sorry, I can almost hear the audience eye rolls on show, don't tell, but it is so important. Obviously, you can't show, don't tell everything. There's times when a recap might be appropriate, but oftentimes when you're telling or when you're creating a first draft, you're telling yourself the story for the first time. It's the first time you've ever figured out exactly, even if you have an outline, exactly the details that are happening. So there's going to be telling in there. Take the time, go back, look at the markers, and I outlined some of those on the Friday presentation. Look at the markers for when you're telling, figure out how to recognize it in your own writing, and see if you can't create a better image in your reader's mind. Because if you're not doing that, your book's going to be boring, right? It just is. Because of the way that readers actually create pictures in their own mind. So that's my like 50,000 foot view of all the stuff you need to do to your manuscript. Does that help, Dwayne?
Yeah.
There's way more. I could talk all day about editing and writing.
I know. Well, I think we could have probably done this as about an 8-hour session and then come back again the next day to come up with stuff. I'd be there. Yeah. So a couple things that I pulled from that too is that my first books were third person, and now I'm working on a first person book. So Tasia's right on advice was you need to read some first person novels. And then my character is a little bit sarcastic, and so she picked out a specific novel by Nelson DeVille, Plum Island, and the character in is particularly sarcastic. It's in first person, and that's John. Kind of it. Yep, that's exactly. So that's my character is going to be like that. So she picked out exactly the perfect book with the perfect character for me to read a feel. So as I said, Diane, it's not a suggestion. This was such a vital thing for me, and I had in my head this character, but it really solidified when I saw it in another book and helped me write in a different style, but also really set it for me.
Also, Dwayne, if I'm not mistaken, DeMille actually writes it where there's a chapter of first person, a chapter third, chapter first, chapter third. And it really, it's when I first started reading The Lion's Game, I think it was startling, but so refreshing and so much fun to see these POV switches and these tense. It was great. You'll love it.
Yeah, and an author that I hadn't read, I hadn't heard of, and now I've plowed through the whole John Corey series of whatever it was, five or six novels, and on to others. So out of it too, I found a new author to read as well.
Yep, good.
Dwayne, if I could just add on to the third person versus first person thing. So we had a novelist a few years ago at the Rights Factory, and we were considering signing her for a novel. It was in third person. Sam Hyatt, who is the CEO of the agency, said, I think I could sign this book, get behind this book, if you put it into first person. So the author went away for a few days and came back with a 300-page novel redone in first person. And Sam said, oh, dear God, this is not going to be good. So he took a look at it quickly and said, okay, here's the thing. It's not just a matter of finding and replacing pronouns. It's a whole different person coming through. So the author went away again and spent a few months on it, and we did sign the book.
All right.
I actually had that exact experience, Diane, with one of my books. It was a 100,000 word manuscript, and that's exactly what my agent said. And I did it. And when you just said that he came back in 2 days, my eyes almost popped out of my head, because it was so difficult. It's probably the most difficult thing I've ever done, but I know it's better. And yeah, it was the most difficult thing I've ever done, because it isn't just a question of just changing things. And even the hers, not all the hers are my main character, right? So you have to actually read each. I was trying to like do a find and not find and replace, but like at least a find and then figure out. But then I was like, that doesn't even work, because then I have to read before and after, and I was just like, this is hard. And I was still finding things I had to do 2 or 3 listening passes where I actually get Siri to read to me versus a lot of people read out loud. I have my electronics read that to me, and then you can hear when it's wrong. It's really, really hard.
One more thing just to say to the middle problem of things you can do to make your novel better. Spend the appropriate amount of time on an edit. When I first started working at the Rights Factory, I would give edits, comprehensive edits. I do substantive edits. And when I heard back from an author in less than 6 months, I was disheartened. Now I just say to authors, I don't want to hear back from you for 6 months minimum.
All right. Just to throw a bit of a wrench, not to start an argument or a fight or anything on the show don't tell. There is one quote from Lee Child that I like, and he says, you know, sometimes you just have to say that Jack Reacher is 6'5", 250 pounds. Put it up out front, and then you don't have to do anything else for the rest of the novel, because everybody knows. Unlike the movie where Tom Cruise is 5 foot, 150 pounds, Jack Reacher.
But with camera angles, he looks big, right?
Yeah, somebody must be like lying on the floor and shooting straight up or something on those. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Dwayne. And I did say that caveat. There are times when a recap is way better, especially you know, when you're writing a sequel to something. Sometimes you just gotta like tell people what happened in the first story and not like show it all again. Right?
And as you said, and I agree, you know, it's an exception, and it's not something, you know, if you use it once in the novel, you've probably used your exception. So get on with it and show the rest of the stuff. We have about 20 minutes left. We want to leave some time maybe for some questions. I'm wondering if we could go through any specific pet peeves you would have with, in general, what you see. So, Suzy?
I don't know that I have pet peeves, honestly, Dwayne. I treat each manuscript, you know, I really believe that writers write what they write, and they do it for the reasons that they do it. So yeah, I try not to. I mean, you guys that know me, I'm probably the most positive person on the planet. So I don't think I would say that I have any pet peeves, but I might come back to this.
Okay, sure, that's fine. Jonas?
You know, I feel like an echo here to Suzy. I don't have any pet peeves either. I mean, I don't, there's a lot of words I don't like in a manuscript. Like, I really don't like the word very, but I mean, that comes from years of writing, and it's really minor details that I might be a detail-oriented person, and I just don't like these smaller words that don't add to a manuscript or strengthen it in any way. I don't have suddenly in a book. And if I see suddenly in anyone's book I'm editing, I will take it out. Unless it's a rare case where it's a characterization of a character who has this word in their vocabulary and there's a real strong point to leave it. So my pet peeves are certain words. I really watch intensifiers and modifiers, filler words, word clutter, began to and started to, those things, unless there's an action that's about to stop, we don't need started to. There's lots of little tiny things that I really focus on. I believe for a piece of writing that you really want to have something strong. And so I really focus on the language, and I also really like to focus on the words. and how they come together. I really liked what Suzy was also saying about the causation between the scenes. And so I really like to see how the words, really get this story together without extra little tricks like exclamation marks and quote colons and semicolons. And so my pet peeves would really be on, I guess I'm sounding like a line editor, but my pet peeves are really focused on making sure that what the reader is looking at, like a lot of white space on the page. I really want that experience to be a experience that causes the pages to turn themselves. I think James Patterson said that once, but I really want the pages to turn themselves. They're just racing along and the reader's not getting jarred at any point. If I'm answering that correctly, I wonder if that's where your question was directed, but that would be what I would look at. I guess my last thing I'll quickly say is speech tags. Please calm down on speech tags. If you need to have them, if you got 5 people, you have 5 people in the room, that's fine. Throw a couple in, but do some actions. Have John set his drink down and set his drink down and speak. You don't need to see John said, jump to the next. Mary said, jump to the next. John, Mark said. I really like to kill speech tags and extolled and intoned and queried. I take all those out. So don't, you can take them all out before you send it to me.
Yeah, we don't want to see the talking heads.
Yeah.
Unless you're writing middle grade, right? And then you need a few more. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Diane?
Yeah, so I don't really have too many pet peeves. And the one I'll talk about right now is a little different than Jonas and Suzy were talking about. I mostly edit literary fiction and memoir. So in literary fiction, one of my, I won't say pet peeves, but one of my sensitive areas is writers not wanting to write plots in literary fiction. So we have I work with some really wonderful Canadian writers, very talented, but we know beforehand that the books that we're looking at won't be bought, that a publisher won't buy them because there isn't enough story. And whereas 20 years ago, some of the books that we read would have been bought, they're not going to be bought now. And it's very frustrating to talk to a literary author and say, you need more plot, and have them say, yeah, no, I'm a literary writer. I don't need plot. Because in fact, you do need plot.
Okay, good. So,
amazing. DWAYNE, I told you I might change my mind after hearing what they had to say. Okay. I'm correct. I don't actually have any pet peeves with the manuscript because I think that you come to an editor or a book coach with wherever you're at, and I'll work with that. I do have a pet peeve sometimes, or a client that isn't the best fit for me, and that is if you want a rubber stamp on your manuscript and you actually aren't looking for feedback on how it goes forward. Like Diane said, you're not going to put in that time to do the edit. And so that's something that I try to interview clients before I accept a manuscript is, well, what are you really looking for? Because if what you want is for me to fix the punctuation and then you're going to go and publish it on Amazon the next day, that is not the type of work that that an editor like myself wants to do, because I want to dive in it with you and I want to know that it doesn't mean that you have to take my advice. You're the god of your own story. I'll point out things to make it stronger, but if what you're really wanting to do is to make sure that you can not have any typos, then a developmental edit is not the right stage for you. Does that make sense?
Yep, perfect. Okay, so the next question, we're winding down. This might be our last question from me, and then we'll take some from the audience. So I'm a very delicate and sensitive guy, and I have sent you 5 chapters of my manuscript, and you've done your edit on it, and you've made the suggestions and questions and the things I need to think about. Any tips for me on how to accept the things you've suggested to change on my absolute darling, my perfect piece of work that I can't understand how you could comment on?
I would love to throw that in there because I am also very sensitive, and you have to learn early to have a thick skin. That being said, when I send out edits, and some can be brutal, and there's an entire rewrite, without going there are a lot of things that need to be fixed in several manuscripts. For some people, I can already tell that's going to be a hard sell for them, and I really try to explain it all. But you know what I do? Here's what I do. The first thing they'll see in the email, or however I'm communicating with them, if we're having a phone call or whatever, the first thing they're going to see or read is the high points. So I often like to think of it as this. I give them the 5 and the 5. So I nail 5 things that I see that they're doing well to amazing. Say their opening scene was great. Their opening line blew me away. I love this. I love that. And actually, you surprised me with this twist. I didn't see that coming at all. You've really nailed the genre down. Like I'm so impressed with what you've done. Now let's get it stronger. And then I go into the edits. To get it stronger, we need to work on this, this, and this. I'm going to send it back to you and here, but I really like to focus on all the high points first and get them feeling really good about what they've done. They've written a book. They've done a great job, and let's get it stronger. So I really try to be a cheerleader, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Diane?
So I would never let an author see my first pass at a manuscript. My first pass, I'm going through finding everything that's wrong with it. And my second pass, I go through and I try to find an appropriate way to say those things that are sounding quite harsh now in the margins, to say them softer, but still say them. And my third pass, I go through finding all the things that I like about it. And that's what I give an author. But in my course at U of T, I teach you, we actually have a rehearsal, how to go through getting criticism, because you don't want to lose your editor by being an ass. So you don't want to yell at your editor. You don't want to call your editor names. If you're angry at your editor, and you may well be, it's very, very hard to take criticism. Go slam doors in your house. That's my best advice. But you do not want to take it out on your editor, because I will walk away from a book if I'm not having a good relationship with the author.
Okay, great. Suzy?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, taking the difficult part is, and I think Jonas mentioned earlier, sometimes you see manuscripts that think that they're ready and they've been edited, and that editor may have tried to do their best, but may have held something back. And I think, myself as an editor, I pride myself in honesty. And so if there are issues with the manuscript, I will tell you that there are issues with the manuscript. Hopefully I'll tell you well. I always highlight the good things. There's always good things. Guys, if you've finished a manuscript, yay,
Wow.
Congratulations, because that is so hard. Do you know how many people I meet that say I want to write a book? Thousands. Do you know how many people I meet that have actually finished their book? Not that many, guys. So if you've done that, great. And now we have something to work with. So, right? So celebrate that piece. But I have a phrase that I put in all of my edits, or usually, I don't know if there's any clients on here and I haven't used it, sorry, but maybe you know this already if you know me better. Please hear all of my edits in my incredibly positive and supportive voice. I am not here to judge you. I am here to help you. I'm here to help you learn. And people sometimes are really embarrassed. Oh, I don't know that my manuscript's ready. Well, if you've taken it as far as you can take it in terms of what I work with, and don't submit it to Diane yet, don't do that. But bring it to me and I will help. I will show you where it's ready, and I will show you where it's not ready. And we'll work on it together. And there's no need for worrying about that, because people do worry. And I actually turn my edits around fairly quickly. I have a really busy, detailed schedule, but what I do is I do one in a 2-week time slot. So I read it, and then I think about it, and then I read it. But I dedicate that time to doing that one manuscript. And what that helps me do is not leave the writer hanging. Because it's scary, right? It's scary to put your work out there, and it's awful. And I know that not all editors do that, but that was something for me as a writer. If I could pay for that, I would do it. So that's the way that I've set up my editing, and I think that it helps. But then there's always that moment. I send the editing, I send my comments, I send the edit letter, and then I check in with the author and I say, "How you feeling about it?" Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't answer for a little bit of time, and
they're
that's okay.
slamming doors. Let them slam the door.
Or they're cry. I've had a little cry. It happens. It's your baby, and you think that you've taken it as far as you can take it, and what you really want me to say, you think you want me to say, I love it, it's awesome, it's ready. But that's not actually what you want me to say, or you wouldn't be sending it to an editor, right? What you really want is honesty. You want to learn. You want to bring that manuscript forward in a way that readers will appreciate it when it finally gets there, right? I hope. Those are the clients I want. If you want that, then I want you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
I didn't have anything from an editor, but I did have a beta reader who I'm pretty sure sent me thoughts on his very first pass. And Diane, there was definitely not a second pass to it. And even though I said I'm sensitive through my career, I've seen some really bad stuff and think I'm tough. Well, it pretty much reduced me to tears on that. So that's, as you've all said, that's not what we want to see. So we've got time for a couple of questions. One is from Kelly. I'm wondering, since projects and writing skills will differ, how someone would shop editors and ensure they aren't being shafted monetarily or by quality. Anyone thoughts? Well, I'll give you a second to think about it. Initially I went through a number of editors, and it took a while to find the one that was going to be right for me. So I did take a financial hit on it a little bit, but through that I learned about myself, and I learned about what kind of editor I needed and what kind of support I needed. So I think that helped me.
I would say the same. I mean, I went through over 6 editors for over a 2-year period at one point, interviewing many until I found one in 2012 that was ideal for me, and I could feel it, and we worked together great. And he did over 25 of my novels. I'm pretty sure he did at least 25, if not 30 of my novels. And he's one of the best editors in the business to date. He knows everything about English. It seems like I'm an editor now, and I send my books to him, and he sees things I can't see. It blows me away. Well, I can in someone else's book, but in my own writing, I can't. So definitely, work with someone, try something. I think based on that question, I would just add that you do your 3-page, say 3-page, I'll just use that number, 3 pages with this editor and see what they've done. But then what I did was I did the edits and then sent that edited piece to another editor, to a friend, blah, blah, blah. Then if they couldn't find anything, that first one got the job. If I sent it to another editor and they said, well, what are you sending it to me for? There's nothing here to fix. I went with the first one that I interviewed. But if I sent it to another editor and there was still, a whole bunch of things wrong, then I wouldn't go near that first one, and I would talk more to the second one. So there were things that I was doing that I was playing around to see who was a good fit.
Those are brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can jump in, recommendations are vital as far as I'm concerned. Find out from other writers who they've used. Do they like them? Do they get along with them? What kind of editor are they? But also check out the books that editor is being associated with.
That's brilliant.
Absolutely, all of that. And I think what you guys are hearing is that there's no one way. Now, how to avoid scams? I mean, don't just sign up for a Facebook ad editor. That's not how to, make sure that there's some connection and some accountability and some professionalism and profile to that person that you're speaking with, that they exist, that they stand behind their work and all of those things. Yes, but it's a bit of a dance, because there may be projects that are better for some editors than others. I have clients that I work with on certain projects, and then they've got other projects that aren't really in my bailiwick that I'll refer to someone else, right? So I think that editing is a very personal thing, and you need to get along with your editor, and you need to trust your editor has what it takes. And I mean, for me, I don't try to convince people anymore that they should work with me. If you are still having questions, then that's okay. Like, I want to work with people who really are seeking me out and who want to work with me.
All right, just give me 1 second. I'm just looking to see. Another question is, so what do you have a writing software you could recommend for writers that will clean up just some of those little issues like punctuation and spelling, etc.?
I don't use any myself, but I just write in Scrivener. But editor tool, a program. I mean, I've seen Grammarly work very well, but that's really the only one I've watched or seen.
I use AutoCrit sometimes, and not with my clients' work, but for my own work. And the two things specifically that I am interested in there are repeated words, because those are very difficult to see in your own work. So I had a manuscript where I had written the word magic 586 times, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a big problem," right? But it was something I didn't notice in my own work, and so. Yeah, so I run some things through that one. Grammarly, if you need help on some of those other things, but it doesn't catch everything. It's certainly not a replacement for the human experience of reading a book. They can't tell you whether or not it works. But they might be able to help you with your punctuation if that's an issue. And I do work with clients who have lots of books out, who just either have an issue with confusables or something that they just can't learn because they can't see the difference. So if you know that you have certain issues, like I know that I can't see repeated words. So I will go, like in my own work, I can see it in other people's work because it's the first time I'm seeing it, but I don't see it in my own. So I will go and use that tool for that. If you know that you have something that you repeatedly do and you're aware of it, but you can't see it in your own work, go use a tool for that, but then get somebody to read it and react to it.
Okay.
I don't have a recommendation for software, but I will recommend this. Read your work out loud and hear it yourself out loud, and you will start to hear things that you might not have noticed on the page.
Absolutely. And one of the things, reading out loud takes a very long time. So if you are so inclined, I actually have my phone set up for my own work, and especially when I did that third person to first person, I have my phone set up. If you go into the settings and choose that you're visually impaired, your phone will read to you what's on the screen. And so I actually open up my manuscripts in iBooks because it will flip the pages. So it will literally read to you the entire manuscript, and you can hear it. It's weird. You can hear the missing words. You can hear when I use the wrong pronoun, those things. I don't use that with my clients' work because it's not detailed enough, but I use it as a final pass on my own work, and I invite you guys to use my tips. And you can speed it up, especially if it's your own work, because you know what's happening. You can speed it way up, and then it's way faster.
One point, I love both points, and I always read a manuscript out loud. There is one thing, though, that I add. Read it backwards. Let me explain. You go to your final page, and you read the page. Then you go back to the second last page. Read it. Then you go. The reason is when you're reading your own work, you already know what's happening. You can get lost in the story. When you get lost in the story, you won't see conjunctions. You won't see small little words. You won't see. You'll miss all kinds of things. Reading it backwards, you can't get lost.
100%. I can't believe you have the patience for that. When I used to co-publish on an online lit mag, I would read the stories and the essays I was publishing from back page to front to catch every little thing. But oh my God, I could never do that for a full book.
And to be clear, that's sort of your last pass to make sure that you haven't missed anything, right? So that's one of the reasons that I don't do copy edit and I don't do proofreading because I don't want to do that work. But yeah, definitely do that to your own manuscripts. Definitely do that before you share it, because if you can catch all those little things, you can't rely on an editor to 100% catch everything. You got to be a team. You got to be a team.
Okay, we're down to our last 90 seconds or so. So there's just a couple of things I want to get in, and then maybe we'll have time for the last word if it's only a last word, so you can think about your last word. Want to thank Joe Compton for being the host today. Go Indy now, and Joe's been great. He's been working everything behind the scenes for us, so everything went smooth, which it did. Thank you, Joe. And then thank you to the panelists too, on behalf of When Words Collide. A great panel. Maybe we can think of a part 2 to come up with for next year, because it was fun working with you guys. I really enjoyed it. So we have 1 minute left, so you have no more than 15 seconds to give a final thought on editing or encouragement or whatever you want.
I'll start. You can always make your book better.
Perfect. Suzy.
If we didn't get to your questions today, I am always there. Just reach out. SUZYVADORI@yahoo.com or on my website.
Yeah, that's great. We got to a couple, but there were more. We apologize for that. Jonas.
Same thing. Reach me, jonasaul.com, and you can ask anything you want. But also, further to that, edit your books. Don't self-edit and then self-publish. You do the reader a disservice, and you show them that money is more important to you, that you did not want to pay for editing. I recommend you pay for editing, and you pay what you get for. If you're paying for a $200 or $300 edit, that's all you're going to get. So make sure you're editing and putting out your best work.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everybody. My last word is keep writing. Thanks for watching.